When my ex asked me to be his best man, I thought he was joking. Like, genuinely, I laughed in his face. But he didn't laugh back. Instead, he said, "I meant it, Liam. You were my best friend long before we ever dated. And you're still the person who knows me best. I want you there, standing next to me." So, I said yes. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I thought saying yes would prove that I was totally over him. That I could handle watching Ryan marry someone else. That I could get through a weekend at his family's lakehouse, surrounded by people pretending nothing awkward had ever happened between us. I packed a suit, some swim trunks, and enough emotional detachment to fake it. Or so I thought. Ryan and I had been broken up for almost a year. He was the one who ended it. Said he needed space, something new. Not gonna lie, it wrecked me for a while. But time does what time does. I moved on. Mostly. When I arrived at the lake house that Friday, Ryan came bounding down the driveway like a Labrador retriever, barefoot, tanned, and happy. He hugged me like we hadn't had something over 100 times, and like he wasn't about to marry someone else in 48 hours. "Glad you came, man," he said, slapping my back. "It means a lot." I nodded, keeping my smile easy. "Would have been weird if your new husband gave the toast, huh?" He laughed. David would probably turn it into a TED Talk. That's when I noticed someone standing on the porch, leaning against a pillar, drink in hand, watching us. Ryan's dad. Thomas. He was in a crisp, white linen shirt, half unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up, the same way he always wore them, like he couldn't be bothered with buttons or formality. His hair was grayer now, but his body hadn't changed. Still tall, still broad, still filled out that shirt like it was made for him. "Hey, stranger," he called out, raising his glass. "Didn't think I'd see you here." I forced a grin. "Still hard to say no to your son." He gave me a look then. Slow, measuring, and something flickered in his expression that made me pause. I didn't think much of it at the time. The rest of the day was a blur of reunions and pre-wedding prep. The wedding party was small. Ryan's fiancé David had his sister as his best woman, Ryan had me, and we were staying in the guest cabins by the water. I dumped my stuff, changed into something lighter, and tried to blend into the crowd. But Thomas kept popping up, offering me drinks, asking me how life in the city was, teasing me about my new grown-up haircut. It was harmless. Probably. I'd always liked Ryan's dad. He was one of those laid-back, charismatic guys who made everyone feel seen. But now there was something else. A certain weight in his gaze. A way his hand lingered on my shoulder when he passed behind me. Later that evening, after the rehearsal dinner, I was sitting alone on the back deck, watching the lake go dark under the stars. Everyone else had wandered off. I had a bourbon in hand and a mess in my chest. I didn't hear Thomas approach until he was already beside me. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, sitting down with his own drink. I shrugged. "Too quiet, too many thoughts." He chuckled, the sound low and easy. "You always did overthink everything." We sat in silence for a while. The lake shimmered. The air smelled like pine and firewood. Then he said, "You're a good man, Liam, coming here, doing this." "I'm just trying not to make it weird." Thomas turned to me then, and something about the look on his face, the way his eyes lingered, made my stomach clench. "You ever wonder," he said, voice quiet, "what would have happened if things went differently? If you'd stayed with him?" I looked at him, caught off guard. "Sometimes, yeah." He nodded. "I liked you two together. Thought you brought out something decent in him." That shouldn't have made my heart twist. But it did. Thomas took a slow sip of his drink, then added, "You've grown into yourself, Liam. I can see it." And there it was again. That pause, that look. He didn't touch me, not then. But the next night, that was a whole different story. The day of the wedding rehearsal started early. Too early. I hadn't slept well, Not because of the mattress or the crickets or the fact that I was sharing a cabin with Ryan's wild-ass cousin who snored like a chainsaw, but because I couldn't stop thinking about the way Thomas looked at me the night before. Like he saw something, or wanted something. I kept replaying the conversation, wondering if I imagined the way his voice had dipped when he said my name, or how his eyes lingered on my mouth when I spoke. But I had to pull it together. I had a job to do. Best man duties, coordinating suits, keeping Ryan calm, and not having a mental breakdown before delivering a speech in front of 80 people. By noon, everyone was bustling around the lawn, setting up for the ceremony. Folding chairs, floral arches, string lights, the whole Pinterest fantasy. Ryan was pacing in his tux pants and no shirt, flapping the schedule in one hand like it might save his life. I played the role, smiled, handled the chaos, but I was constantly aware of Thomas. He moved through the crowd like he owned the space, sleeves rolled again, tie loose, drink in hand like always. Every time I caught his eye, and it happened more than once, he didn't look away, and neither did I. That night was the welcome party, more laid back than the rehearsal dinner. Bonfire by the lake, beers and coolers. Acoustic guitar someone kept pretending they knew how to play. Ryan and David disappeared early, probably to get rest or whatever excuse they told people to sneak off. I stayed by the fire, sipping from a sweating beer can and watching the flames. A couple people drifted off to their cabins. Laughter echoed somewhere behind me. The mood was loose, slow, hazy. I felt someone drop into the chair next to me. I didn't have to look. "I thought you'd be gone by now," Thomas said. I smirked, keeping my eyes on the fire. Still got one more day to fake being charming. "You're doing fine," he said, voice quieter now. "Better than fine." I finally looked over at him. The firelight hit his face just enough to make the lines around his mouth look softer. There was a kind of ease about him, but also something tight underneath, like he was thinking too hard for someone who always came across effortless. "You good?" I asked. He held my gaze for a beat. "Yeah. Just thinking." "About?" A pause. Then he leaned slightly closer. Not dramatically, just enough that I felt it, the warmth of him. The shift in the air. "You ever feel like you're watching everyone move on without you?" he asked. "Like the world's racing ahead and you're just sitting still?" That hit harder than I expected. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know that feeling." He looked down at his drink, swirled it once, then back up at me. "You've changed since the last time I saw you," he said. "You look more sure of yourself, like you figured something out." I swallowed. The heat from the fire suddenly felt like too much. "I've been through some shit," I said. "I had to figure some things out." Thomas gave a small smile. "It shows." And then, before I could respond, he reached over, slow, deliberate, and brushed something off my shirt. A speck of ash, maybe, or nothing at all. His hand lingered, fingers just barely grazing my collarbone. I froze. He didn't move. He just looked at me. And the look? It wasn't confused, or drunk, or tentative. It was very, very clear. I shifted in my chair, pulse suddenly too loud in my ears. "Thomas?" I said, low. "Yeah? What are you doing?" Another pause. Then, softly, "Honestly, I don't know. But I've been thinking about this for longer than I should admit." My heart jumped. He leaned back slightly, giving me space, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "We don't have to talk about this," he said, "and I'm not trying to put you in a weird position. But you should know. I see you. I always have." I was quiet for a long time. Finally, I whispered, "You're my ex's dad." He nodded, almost like he'd rehearsed this moment. "I know. And he's getting married tomorrow." "I know that too." We sat there in the firelight, the lake whispering behind us, the moment stretching so tight I thought it might snap. I didn't say anything else. But I didn't walk away either. And when he eventually stood and said, "Come walk with me," I got up and followed. We didn't say much as we walked. The night was warm, the kind of soft heat that sticks to your skin. Crickets hummed in the distance, and the lake glinted faintly under the moonlight. The path behind the guest cabins curved toward the boathouse, and Thomas led the way like he knew exactly where he was going. And maybe he did. I should have stopped him, should have said something, asked what the hell we were doing, but I didn't. Instead, I followed, heart hammering, brain spinning, feet moving like they weren't mine. He pushed open the door to the boathouse. It creaked, the hinges protesting. Inside, it was dark, save for the sliver of moonlight leaking through the high window. Wooden beams, old life vests, the faint smell of cedar and lake water. He didn't lock the door. Didn't close it all the way, either. He just turned to face me and waited. I stood there, barely inside, pulse loud in my ears. "This is insane," I said quietly. Thomas nodded. "Yeah, it is. Ryan's getting married tomorrow. I know. I used to be part of your family, now I'm just some guy who got dumped." He took a step closer. Not touching, just closing the gap. "You were never just some guy," he said. His voice was low but steady. There was no drunken slur, no hesitation. Just this unbearable, impossible tension between us. "I always wondered," he said, eyes scanning my face. "Back when you and Ryan were together, I saw how you took care of him, how patient you were. You were kind, steady, and I kept thinking—" He stopped himself. "Never mind." "No," I said, heart in my throat. "Say it." He looked at me like he was trying to decide whether to lie or tell the truth. "I kept thinking," he said, "that if I had someone like you, I wouldn't have let them go." My breath caught. He looked older in that moment. Not in a tired way, but in a way that made it clear he'd lived through more than he ever let on. There was something lonely in his expression, something raw. "I'm not here to confuse you," he said. "I'm not even asking for anything. I just needed to say it. I needed you to know. And maybe that should have been the end of it. A weird confession in a dark boathouse. Something we'd both laugh about someday, or pretend never happened." But then his hand found mine, and he didn't pull me in. He just held it. Softly, warm, like a question. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. I stared at our hands, wondering how the hell we got here, wondering what kind of person I was becoming. "I don't know what I'm doing," I whispered. He nodded. "Neither do I." We stood like that for a while, not kissing, not touching beyond the palm of his hand pressed against mine, just breathing, just knowing. Eventually, I said, "We can't do anything. Not tonight. Not here. I know. We shouldn't even be talking like this. I know that too." But he didn't let go. And neither did I. When we finally stepped back out into the night, I felt different. I felt something shift inside me. I couldn't explain it, but I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning hit me like a freight train. I woke up groggy, vaguely hungover, and fully overwhelmed by what had happened the night before. The sunlight streaming through the cabin window didn't help. It made everything feel too real, too bright, too exposed. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it hadn't meant anything. That it was just a weird moment between two people who maybe, accidentally, shared something they shouldn't have. But I could still feel the weight of his hand in mine. The stillness of the boathouse, the way he looked at me like he meant every damn word. By the time I got up and dressed, the lake house was already buzzing with wedding prep. Vendors were unloading floral arrangements, someone was setting up a makeshift bar on the lawn, and the photographer was yelling something about golden hour. Even though it was barely 9 a.m., I avoided the main house and wandered down toward the dock, hoping for a moment of quiet. Of course, that's where I found him. Thomas. He was crouched by the edge, tying something to one of the boat cleats, still in a black t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, hair damp like he'd just showered. He looked up when he saw me, give a small nod. No smile, no wink, just acknowledgement. I stood, a few feet away, hands in my pockets, heart rattling. "Morning," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. "Morning." Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Neither of us moved. "You all right?" he asked after a minute. I let out a breath. "I don't know. Are you?" Thomas straightened, wiping his hands on his thighs. "Been better." "Been worse." I almost laughed. "Yeah. Same." He stepped a little closer, voice low. "I wasn't trying to mess with your head last night." "I know," I said. "It's just complicated." He nodded. "I'm not expecting anything. You said we shouldn't do anything, and I meant it when I said I understood." I looked out over the water, the ripples catching light in that way that makes everything look perfect, even when nothing feels that way. "But you meant what you said?" I asked, not looking at him. "I did." I nodded slowly. "So did I." Another pause. Then, softer. "You said you'd always seen me." He stepped closer again, just a foot away now. "I did. Still do." I turned to face him, finally letting our eyes meet. There was that same calm in his expression, that quiet intensity that never felt performative. It wasn't like he was trying to seduce me. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't playing games. He was just there. Real, solid, honest in a way that made it hard to look away. "I don't know what this is," I said. "I'm not even sure it's anything." "Maybe it's not," he replied. "Maybe it's just a moment." "And what happens after the wedding?" He smiled faintly. "We both go back to our lives and pretend this didn't happen?" "If that's what you need," he said, "then yeah." But he didn't sound convinced. Neither was I. From the distance, someone called my name. Ryan, probably. I took a step back, the moment snapping like a rubber band. "I should get ready," I said. Thomas nodded. "Of course," but as I turned to go, I felt his eyes still on me. And part of me, a part one didn't quite understand, wanted to go back and stay there. Right next to him. The wedding went off without a hitch. At least from the outside. Everything was beautiful. Tasteful. The kind of ceremony you'd see in a wedding blog. Mismatched chairs in a field. A violinist playing acoustic covers. Emily in a sleek, minimalist dress that made every guest whisper, "Wow," when she walked down the aisle. I stood next to Ryan at the altar, holding the ring box in my sweaty palm, trying not to think about anything except what I had to do next. Smile, hand off the ring, give a speech that wouldn't make me sound bitter or pathetic. The moment he said, "I do," something in my chest twisted. Not because I still wanted him. Not really. But because something about seeing him move on so completely, so publicly, made me feel unmoored. Like I didn't know where I fit anymore. After the ceremony, the lawn filled with guests and champagne and that giddy, tipsy energy that always follows a successful wedding. I made my rounds, took a few photos, shook hands, said all the right things, but I couldn't stop scanning the crowd, looking for him. Thomas was standing near the edge of the tent, talking with a couple of older relatives. He looked relaxed, the top two buttons of his shirt undone, a drink in hand, laughing politely at something someone said. He didn't look at me once. I don't know why that got to me. After the toasts and the first dance, which, yes, I made it through without crying or vomiting, I slipped away from the tent and wandered down the stone path that led to the dock. The sun was just starting to dip behind the trees, the lake turning that deep, hazy blue. I leaned against the railing and tried to breathe. A few minutes passed before I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn. "You disappeared," Thomas said softly. "Just needed air." He came up beside me, arms resting on the rail. "Your speech was good," I gave a short laugh. "I blacked out during most of it." "Still, you said what he needed to hear." We stood in silence for a beat. Then he said, So, this is it. I nodded, not sure what I was agreeing to. The end of the weekend? The end of whatever this was? I wasn't expecting any of this, I said quietly. Me neither. And yet, here we are. He smiled, but it was sad around the edges. I wasn't trying to cross a line, Liam. I know what this looks like. I know it's messy. It is, I admitted, but it's also real. I looked at him then, the fading light catching the silver in his hair, the tiredness around his eyes. He looked older than he had the night before, but somehow that made him even more handsome, more grounded, more him. I don't want to be a mistake, I said. You're not. I don't want to be someone you only think about when you've had a few drinks and it's dark out. His expression shifted, something more serious, more intent. You're not that either. We stood there, the air between us thick with all the things we couldn't say, all the things we maybe shouldn't say. Then, finally, I whispered, "What happens if I don't walk away this time?" He didn't answer with words. He just reached out, fingers brushing against mine, like he was offering, not taking. I let my hand fall into his, and for once, I didn't pull back. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't sneak off into the woods or make some reckless, romantic decision under the stars. There were no grand declarations, no confessions whispered between sheets. We just stood there, hand in hand, the lake reflecting bits of moonlight, the sounds of the reception echoing behind us. Laughter, clinking glasses, the soft pulse of music. Thomas let go first, not abruptly, not in rejection, just enough to say, "I'll let you decide how far this goes." "I should probably head back," he said, voice low, "before people start noticing." I nodded, and he hesitated, like he wanted to say more, or maybe kiss me right there. But he didn't. He just turned, walking slowly up the path toward the lights and the people and the world that still thought of him as someone else entirely. I stayed by the water until my beer got warm. Back at the tent, the party was in full swing. David and Ryan were slow dancing barefoot on the grass, a little drunk, a little too happy to notice anything around them. I made the rounds again, hugged people goodbye, made excuses about an early morning drive. By midnight, I was in my cabin, showered, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed once. "Thomas, come by the main house. If you want." No pressure, no emoji, just that. I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying, "Me. 10 minutes. The walk up to the main house felt unreal. Everything was quiet now. The music had died down. The tents were half lit, like the magic had started to unravel. I slipped through the side gate, around the porch and up to the kitchen door, which was cracked open. Inside, the house was dim. Thomas was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the doorframe in a dark t-shirt and sweatpants. Casual, but clean. He looked like he'd been pacing. He said nothing at first, just looked at me, carefully. "Is this crazy?" I asked. He nodded. "Absolutely. And you still want me here?" Another nod, slower. "I haven't wanted something this badly in a long time," he said. That did something to me. Made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. He didn't kiss me right away. We stood there, close but not touching, just looking at each other, like we were trying to memorize what this felt like, what it looked like, the line we were about to cross. And when he did finally lean in, it wasn't rushed. His hand slid gently to the back of my neck, his forehead brushing mine before our lips met. Soft, tentative, but sure. No one would have believed it. Not Ryan, not anyone at that wedding. But in that quiet, dim hallway, something unspoken passed between us, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Desire, yes, but also understanding that this, whatever it was, wasn't about filling a gap or making a statement or getting back at anyone. It was about being seen, being wanted. He led me through the house without a word, down the hall and into a guest room I'd never noticed before. The sheets were crisp, the window cracked slightly, letting in the cool night air. And when we kissed again, this time deeper, with less hesitation. I stopped thinking about what it meant, or who he was, or what would happen in the morning. For the first time in a long time, I just let myself feel. I woke up before he did. It was still early, that in-between time where the sky starts lightening, but everything's still quiet. I lay there, on my side, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest, the way the sheet barely clung to his hip, his arm thrown lazily across the pillow where my head had been. It didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt steady. When Thomas stirred, his eyes met mine instantly, like he hadn't been asleep at all. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "You okay?" I nodded. "You?" He exhaled. Surprisingly, yeah. There was a softness to his voice I hadn't heard before, like the armor he always wore around. Everyone else had finally cracked. We didn't talk much after that. There wasn't a need to. We just lay there, tangled up in the silence, letting the weight of what happened settle between us. Eventually, I got up, got dressed. He walked me to the door like it was just another morning, like I wasn't slipping out of his bed after what could only be called the most complicated night of my life. On the porch before I stepped off, he caught my wrist. "Liam," I turned, "if this is something you regret, it's not." His shoulders eased, just a little. I added, "But that doesn't mean I know what it is yet." He nodded. "I don't either." We stood there for a beat. Then he said, "Let me know when you do." I made it back to my cabin before most of the guests had even stirred. Ryan and David were already off on their honeymoon by mid-morning, waving goodbye from the back seat of a silver rental car, blissfully unaware. I stayed behind to help clean up. Thomas didn't hover, didn't pull me aside, just offered a few quick glances when no one was watching. It wasn't until I was packing my bag that I found the note, tucked into the pocket of my jacket. "If you ever want to talk, or not talk, you know where to find me. -T. No phone number, no dramatic gesture, just that." I held on to it the entire drive home. It's been a few weeks now. We've texted a little. Nothing heavy, just check-ins. The kind of messages that say, "I'm still here," without needing to explain too much. I don't know where this is going. I don't even know what to call it. But I do know this. Being my ex's best man didn't break me. It reminded me that even after loss, even after heartbreak and awkward speeches, and standing too close to the past, there's still something ahead. Something real. Something unexpected. And sometimes it looks a lot like his dad,